Sarah believed she had everything: riches, luxury, and the perfect husband. But what she didn't know was that the man she was cheating on wasn't just her husband. He was an undercover FBI agent, keeping an eye on her the whole time. Sarah was everything a woman could dream of: beautiful, confident, and always the center of attention at the most exclusive events. She lived in a world where money wasn't an issue, where luxury was just part of her daily routine. Every morning, she woke up in a mansion that could be mistaken for a palace, with designer clothes neatly hanging in her walk-in closet and the latest sports car parked outside. She had it all, or so it seemed. Her husband, Daniel, was a self-made millionaire, successful, charming, and everything a woman could want. He provided for her in ways most could only imagine, showering her with gifts, trips, and the kind of attention that made other women jealous. To the outside world, they were the perfect couple, the power pair everyone admired. But behind the glitz and glamour, Sarah's life was starting to feel empty. She had the diamonds, the high-end dinners, the yachts, but something was missing. The sparkle in her eyes had faded, replaced with a sense of boredom. Daniel was always busy. His work consumed him, and while Sarah had everything money could buy, she didn't have what she truly craved: excitement. Little did she know, everything was about to change. Their life appeared like something out of a fairy tale, a life most people only dreamed of. Their mansion, nestled in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods, looked like it belonged on a magazine cover. With its grand marble floors, endless rooms, and sweeping views of the city, it was the kind of home that whispered wealth at every corner. Exotic vacations were a regular part of their lifestyle: private jets taking them to sun-soaked islands, luxury resorts, and hidden getaways where the rich and famous played. From sipping cocktails on golden beaches to exploring the world's most exclusive destinations, every trip was like a new adventure. For Sarah, it was the life she had always imagined, surrounded by endless luxury and freedom. And when they weren't traveling, they were hosting lavish parties, elite social gatherings that drew the most influential people from the city's high society. From celebrities to CEOs, everyone seemed to want a piece of their world. The laughter, the champagne, the constant buzz of excitement. It was the kind of life that made others envious. To the outside world, Sarah and Daniel were living the dream. Their life was a flawless picture, a perfect display of wealth and success. But appearances can be deceiving. But beneath the surface, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. Despite the wealth, the glamorous parties, and the endless luxury, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Her life, once full of excitement, now felt empty, like a beautiful glittering shell with nothing inside. She had everything she could ever want: designer clothes, a mansion that could rival any palace, and a husband who adored her. Yet, with each passing day, the excitement started to fade. The trips to exotic islands, the expensive dinners, and the sparkling jewels, none of it gave her the thrill it once did. Deep down, Sarah began to crave something more, something dangerous, something reckless. She didn't know what exactly, just that the predictable, safe life she'd been living felt suffocating. It was then that a dangerous thought crossed her mind. What if I could break free, even just for a moment? What if I could do something wild, something no one would ever expect? And that thought, that tiny spark of curiosity, would set off a chain of events that Sarah couldn't control. She didn't know it yet, but the urge for danger was about to lead her down a dark path, one filled with betrayal, secrets, and a twist she could never have seen coming. One evening, At one of the high-profile events Sarah was used to attending, everything changed. The room was filled with the city's elite, millionaires, celebrities, and business tycoons, all mingling under sparkling chandeliers. But it wasn't the wealth or the flashy guests that caught Sarah's attention. It was him, Ryan. A man who seemed to float through the crowd with ease, his presence both magnetic and mysterious. He wasn't like the others. While everyone else was dressed in their finest suits and gowns, Ryan wore a simple yet striking black tuxedo that made him stand out in the sea of wealthy, overdressed faces. His smile was confident, yet there was something about his eyes, something dark and daring. It was clear he wasn't just another businessman. There was an edge to him, an allure that Sarah couldn't resist. Their eyes met across the room, and in that instant, she felt something stir inside her. As he made his way over, the crowd seemed to part for him. He introduced himself with a smooth voice, his charm undeniable. Ryan spoke of his business ventures, casually dropping names of powerful figures, but Sarah couldn't help but feel something wasn't quite right. His story seemed too perfect, too rehearsed, but there was no denying the chemistry between them. With every word, every subtle touch, Sarah felt herself drawn in deeper. The thrill she had been craving suddenly appeared in front of her. Little did she know, this chance encounter with Ryan was the beginning of a dangerous game, one that would pull her further away from the life she knew and closer to a truth she was never meant to uncover. Drawn to Ryan's mystery and rebellious attitude, Sarah found herself unable to resist. What started as casual conversations at the events turned into private texts and secret meetings. There was something thrilling about it, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Ryan wasn't like the other men she knew. He didn't follow the rules. He didn't care about status or appearances. He was reckless, unapologetic, and that made Sarah's heart race in a way her perfect life never had. Soon, their encounters became more frequent, more intimate. Sarah started sneaking around behind Daniel's back, telling him she was busy with friends, working late, or attending charity events when, in reality, she was with Ryan. Each secret meeting felt like a dangerous game, and she was hooked. Every moment with Ryan was filled with an intensity that she couldn't ignore. There were whispered words of affection, stolen kisses in the quiet corners of upscale bars, and the undeniable thrill of doing something forbidden. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt so alive, so reckless. The excitement was intoxicating. But with each lie she told, with each sneaky rendezvous, a sense of unease started to creep in. Something didn't sit right, but Sarah couldn't pull herself away. The danger was part of the allure, and the more she indulged in this secret life, the further she drifted from the husband she once adored, from the life she once thought was everything. With every passing day, Sarah fell deeper into Ryan's world. Expensive gifts, designer jewelry, rare perfumes, and lavish surprises became the norm. He knew exactly how to spoil her, how to make her feel like the most important woman in the world. Each gift seemed to come with a promise, a whisper of something more dangerous, more thrilling. They met in secret, hotel rooms far from the prying eyes of her social circles, hidden corners of private clubs where the world didn't exist outside of their bubble. Each rendezvous felt like stepping into a different world, one where nothing mattered except their stolen moments together. The heat between them was undeniable, and with every kiss, every touch, Sarah's heart raced faster, caught in a whirlwind of passion and excitement she hadn't felt in years. Ryan's promises were whispered in her ear, words that seemed too good to be true, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that they were all she wanted to hear. He spoke of a life of freedom, a life without the constraints of wealth and appearances, a life where they could be together, no secrets, no lies. But as Sarah fell deeper, a nagging feeling tugged at her conscience. There were moments when Ryan's charm slipped, glimpses of something darker, something she couldn't quite place. He was always watching her, always calculating his next move. But the pull of his mystery was too strong, and Sarah couldn't pull herself away. The more she allowed herself to be swept up in his world, the more she drifted from the man who had given her everything. And the deeper she sank, the harder it would be to find her way back. As Sarah continued to dive deeper into her secret affair with Ryan, strange things began to happen. At first, they were small, insignificant, easy to brush off, but slowly, they started to add up. Her phone, once her lifeline, began acting oddly. Text messages would disappear, calls would drop unexpectedly, and sometimes she could have sworn the screen flickered when she wasn't touching it. She convinced herself it was just a glitch, maybe a malfunction, nothing to worry about. But deep down, a creeping unease started to settle in. Then there were the questions Daniel started asking. Little things at first, innocent enough, or so it seemed. "Where were you last night?" he'd ask in passing. "Who were you with?" His voice, always calm, had a subtle edge to it. It wasn't like Daniel to pry. He trusted her, or at least that's what she thought. But the questions kept coming, becoming more pointed, more suspicious. Sometimes, after long silences at the dinner table, Sarah would catch him watching her, his eyes calculating, piercing. It was as if he was seeing through her every lie, his gaze a quiet accusation she couldn't escape. And then, one night, she found something that made her blood run cold. A note, a single line written in Daniel's handwriting, hidden inside her purse. "I know what you're doing." Her heart skipped a beat. A rush of panic flooded her chest. Was Daniel onto her? Had he known all along? Or was it just paranoia creeping in, twisting her thoughts into something darker? Sarah's world was beginning to crack. The perfect life she'd carefully built was starting to crumble, and she didn't know who or what to trust anymore. As the days passed, the strange occurrences grew harder to ignore. One evening, as Sarah was walking toward her favorite cafe, a small, cozy spot she frequented to escape the madness of her high society life, she noticed something unsettling. A sleek, black car. It wasn't unusual for cars to be parked nearby, but this one, it was always there. Every time she visited, no matter the hour, it was parked across the street, idling, with tinted windows that blocked the view of the driver. At first, she thought it was a coincidence, but then it became too frequent to ignore. She tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just someone else's regular spot, but there was something about the car that made her uneasy. It never seemed to move, never had any sign of life, no one getting in or out. It was always there, lurking in the background, like a shadow that refused to leave. One day, as she walked out of the cafe, she caught a glimpse of the driver's side mirror, reflecting a figure sitting in the car. The figure's face was hidden in the shadows, but she could feel their eyes on her, watching her every move. Her heart skipped. Was someone following her? Was Daniel finally starting to catch on to her secret life? A chill ran down Sarah's spine. This wasn't just a coincidence anymore. Someone was watching her, and she couldn't figure out who or why. Despite the growing unease, Sarah tried to brush it off. After all, it was probably nothing, just her mind playing tricks on her. Daniel was, after all, a boring businessman, the kind of man who was always buried in paperwork, stuck in endless meetings, his attention consumed by his empire. There was no way he could be keeping tabs on her. She convinced herself that the black car was just a coincidence. Maybe it was a regular commuter, someone who worked nearby, or a random visitor to the cafe. And the strange questions Daniel had been asking? Probably just his own insecurities creeping in. Nothing more. She laughed it off, pushing the nagging feeling deep into the back of her mind. She told herself that Ryan's charm and their secret rendezvous were all the excitement she needed. Daniel had no reason to suspect anything. He was too caught up in his own world. But even as Sarah tried to rationalize everything, there was that sinking feeling in her gut that wouldn't go away. That nagging thought that maybe, just maybe, she was wrong. Maybe Daniel wasn't the clueless businessman she thought he was. Maybe he knew more than she realized. But for now, she chose to ignore it. The black car, the questions, she brushed them aside. It had to be nothing. After all, Daniel was just a boring businessman, right? One night, Sarah met Ryan at their usual spot, a quiet, dimly lit bar where they could escape the world. But tonight, something felt different. As she walked in, she noticed the tension in the air, the way his eyes darted around the room, scanning for anyone who might be watching. His usual charm seemed to be replaced by an unusual intensity, something darker lurking beneath the surface. Ryan didn't greet her with his usual smile. Instead, he motioned for her to sit down quickly, his voice low and urgent. "I need your help, Sarah," he said, his tone serious, almost too serious. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The playful energy that had once surrounded them was gone, replaced by a weight she couldn't shake. "What is it?" she asked, trying to hide the growing anxiety in her chest. Ryan leaned in closer, his voice barely a whisper. "I need you to help me smuggle a package," he said, his eyes locking with hers. "It's a simple job, just a quick drop-off. No one will even know you're involved." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She stared at him, her mind racing. "A package?" she repeated, the words tasting strange in her mouth. It didn't make sense. This was dangerous, reckless. It was the kind of thing she only heard about in movies, not something she was supposed to be a part of. Ryan's expression hardened, his gaze unwavering. "You want excitement, don't you? This is it, a real rush. No more boring, predictable life. This is your chance to do something wild, something that will make you feel alive." His words were like a drug, pulling her in. The thrill, the danger. It was exactly what she had been craving. But a voice inside her screamed for caution. This wasn't a game. This wasn't just some harmless fling. But then again, wasn't this exactly what she wanted? A chance to break free from the chains of her perfect life, to step into the unknown. For a moment, Sarah hesitated. The weight of the decision hung heavy in the air, but the allure of danger, of doing something forbidden, was too tempting. And in that moment, the life she knew, her perfect, safe life, seemed like a distant memory. "Okay," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'll do it." Nervous, but desperate for his love, Sarah felt her resolve begin to crack. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady herself. The rational part of her mind screamed for her to walk away, to remember the life she had, the man who loved her, the risks of what she was about to do. But then she looked at Ryan. The intensity in his eyes, the way he seemed to believe in her, to pull her into his world, was irresistible. He'd always made her feel like she was the most important person in the room, like she was special. And now, with his words dangling in the air, the promise of excitement, of danger, of something far beyond the life she had known, It all seemed too tempting to resist. The longing in her chest deepened, the fear mingling with something darker, more thrilling. She wanted to be part of his world. She wanted to feel that rush, to do something that would make her feel truly alive again. "I'll do it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, the words escaping before she could stop them. Her heart raced as she heard herself speak, the gravity of the decision sinking in. Ryan smiled, his expression shifting from tension to triumph. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers as he gripped her hand gently. "Good," he said, his voice soothing, yet filled with something dangerous. "This will change everything." But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Deep down, a small voice whispered that she was walking into a trap. She tried to push the thought aside, but it lingered, like a shadow, following her every move. As Ryan leaned in closer, his lips brushing her ear, Sarah couldn't help but wonder. What had she just agreed to? The night of the drop-off finally arrived. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she stood in the dark alley, the package clutched tightly in her hands. Her palms were sweaty, her breath shallow, every nerve on edge. Ryan had been clear. This was it, the final step. Just deliver the package, and she could walk away. It would be over. But as she stood there, waiting, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The streets were eerily quiet, the shadows stretching longer than they should have been. She looked around, half expecting someone to jump out of the darkness, but there was no one. Just the cold, empty silence. Then, a car pulled up. It was a sleek black sedan, just like the one Ryan always drove, and she breathed a small sigh of relief. He stepped out, his silhouette emerging from the shadows, and she quickly moved to hand over the package. She felt the weight of it leave her hands as she passed it to him, her pulse racing. But before she could even take a step back, the sound of sirens tore through the night. Whoosh! Red and blue lights flooded the alley, blinding her, making her freeze in place. A flood of panic surged through her veins as she turned around, the harsh glare of police cars surrounding her from every angle. The air was thick with the screech of tires as officers rushed toward her, their badges gleaming in the light. Her heart stopped. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The reality of what was happening hit her like a cold wave. She'd been set up. The whole thing was a trap. Ryan wasn't just a charming businessman. He wasn't who he'd said he was. The man she had fallen for, the man she had trusted, was not who he appeared to be. A voice pierced through her fog of disbelief. "Hands where we can see them." The world around her blurred as the red and blue lights danced in her vision, the weight of the situation sinking in. How had it all gone so wrong? The sirens blared louder, their wail piercing through the night. Sarah's mind raced, but her body felt frozen in place, as if the world around her was moving in slow motion. She couldn't comprehend what was happening. The red and blue lights danced on the walls, casting an eerie glow over the alley. Then, without warning, FBI agents stormed in from every direction. Their boots pounded the pavement, and their voices echoed through the night, commanding everyone to get down, to freeze. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she looked around, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear anything else. The officers were everywhere, surrounding her. She felt the weight of their gazes, the cold authority in their eyes. They moved like a well-coordinated force, closing in on her, and in that moment, everything she thought she knew about her life seemed to shatter. Ryan, the man she had trusted, the man who had promised her excitement, who had pulled her into this dangerous world, he was nowhere to be seen. Had he betrayed her? Was he part of this? A voice rang out sharply, commanding her to put her hands where they could see them. She raised her hands slowly, her body still rigid, as if she couldn't quite believe what was happening. Was this real? Her gaze flickered toward the agents, their expressions hard, their weapons drawn. She felt like a deer caught in headlights, unable to move. Fear surged through her like an electric current. "Ma'am," one of the agents said, stepping toward her, his eyes cold, calculating. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to smuggle illegal goods." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Conspiracy? Illegal goods? Her mind swirled with confusion and disbelief. How had it come to this? How had she fallen so far, so fast? But then, one thought pierced through the chaos. The thought that terrified her more than anything else. Daniel must know. As Sarah stood there, paralyzed by fear, the world around her felt like it was closing in. The agents moved in, surrounding her, their voices a blur in her ears. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the chaos unfolding before her. She had no idea what was happening or how it had gone so wrong. Then, just as the weight of her situation began to crush her, a familiar voice cut through the noise. "Hold it." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Her eyes snapped toward the voice, and there, stepping forward from the shadows, was Daniel. Daniel? Her breath caught in her throat. He looked different, calmer, more composed than she had ever seen him. His eyes, once warm and loving, now held a cold, unwavering intensity. He didn't look like the man she had spent years with. No, this man was someone else entirely. He walked toward her slowly, his steps deliberate, his gaze never leaving hers. "Sarah," he said, his voice firm, but there was a hint of something else in it, something she couldn't quite place. "It's over." The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Her knees nearly buckled beneath her, and she could feel the color drain from her face. Daniel. He wasn't just the successful businessman she had married. He wasn't just the man she'd trusted with her life. He had been playing a role all along, an undercover FBI agent. She stared at him in disbelief, her mind trying to wrap around the truth she could no longer deny. The life they had built, the luxury, the mansions, the vacations, it had all been a front. Daniel had been watching her, watching every move she made. The pieces began to fall into place. The odd questions, the strange behavior, the things that had felt off, but that she had brushed aside. It had all been part of his plan. She had been living in a lie. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice cracking. You were watching me?" His gaze softened for just a moment, but the weight of his words was clear. "I had to, Sarah. I had no choice. You're under arrest for your involvement in a criminal operation." As the words hung in the air, Sarah's world shattered. The man she had betrayed, the man she thought she knew, had known everything all along. As Sarah stood frozen, trying to process the whirlwind of revelations, Daniel's gaze hardened. He stepped closer, his presence commanding and undeniable. His next words hit her like a ton of bricks, shattering any remaining illusion she had about the life she thought she was living. "Ryan," Daniel said, his voice low, almost chilling. "He's not a businessman. He's a high-profile criminal, someone I've been tracking for years." Sarah's chest tightened, her heart pounding in her ears as the full scope of the situation started to sink in. Ryan? The man she had fallen for, the man who had promised her excitement and adventure, wasn't who he said he was. Daniel continued, his tone steady, betraying none of the emotions that Sarah was struggling to suppress. "Ryan's been involved in a series of illegal operations, smuggling, money laundering, trafficking. He's a mastermind, a dangerous player in an international criminal network. And you, Sarah, you were part of his plan. Her breath caught in her throat. A criminal mastermind. The man she had trusted, the man who had whispered sweet nothings into her ear, had been using her as a pawn in a game she didn't even know was being played. She could feel the walls closing in on her. Ryan's sweet words, the lavish dates, the stolen moments, they had all been a ruse, a calculated ploy to pull her into his dangerous world. And all the while, Daniel had been watching, waiting. You were never just a wife, Sarah, Daniel continued, his eyes now piercing through her. You were a target, and I had to make sure you weren't caught in the web he was weaving. The truth slammed into her like a freight train. She had been the bait, the perfect cover for Ryan's operation. And Daniel, the man she had doubted, the one she had thought was just a boring millionaire. He had been working undercover to bring Ryan down, and she had unknowingly become a part of the sting operation. Why didn't you tell me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper, full of confusion and betrayal. Daniel's expression softened, but his resolve was unwavering. Because you wouldn't have believed me, and I couldn't risk it, not when you were so close to him. As the weight of his words pressed down on her, Sarah's mind spiraled. She had been so blind, so consumed by the allure of Ryan's world, that she had failed to see the truth right in front of her. And now, it was too late. And Sarah? She was the bait, without even knowing it. The realization hit her like a slap to the face. Her chest tightened, and the room seemed to spin as the truth unfolded around her. She had been used, manipulated. The life she thought she was living, her perfect marriage, her glamorous existence, had been nothing more than a carefully constructed lie, all orchestrated by Daniel. She had been the perfect cover for Ryan, the unsuspecting wife who would never raise suspicion. Her every move, every flirtation, every whispered secret to Ryan had been carefully monitored by Daniel, the undercover agent who had been in her life the entire time. She had never even suspected a thing. All those romantic dinners, those stolen moments of passion with Ryan, had been a facade. Every second of it had been a setup. She had thought she was living the high life, basking in luxury, feeling powerful. But all along, she had been walking in a trap, unaware that the very man she was betraying had been watching her every move. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of it. Had Daniel known from the start? Had he always been this distant, this cold, because he was playing a part? Had he ever really loved her, or was she just another pawn in his mission? Sarah. Daniel's voice broke through her thoughts, firm and unwavering. You need to understand. This wasn't just about you. You were never just the wife. You were the key to getting to Ryan, and now everything is over. She stared at him, her heart a tangle of conflicting emotions. A part of her wanted to scream, to lash out at him for all the lies, for using her so ruthlessly. But another part of her, a part that was too broken to fight, understood. She had been nothing more than a tool in a larger game, a game she hadn't even known she was playing. She had been the bait, and now she was caught. The agents moved quickly, their hands cuffing Ryan with practiced ease. The air was thick with tension, the weight of the moment pressing down on Sarah's chest. She stood there, frozen, her mind unable to keep up with the chaos unfolding before her. Ryan, the man she had fallen for, the man who had promised her a life of excitement and danger. He was being dragged away, his face contorted in frustration and defeat. His eyes briefly met hers, and in that fleeting moment, Sarah saw the truth. The man she had trusted was nothing more than a criminal, a master manipulator who had used her in ways she couldn't have imagined. "Ryan," she whispered, her voice barely audible, her heart breaking with every word. But Ryan didn't answer. He didn't even look back. The agents led him away, their hands tight around his arms as they shoved him into the back of a black van. The door slammed shut, cutting off any chance of Sarah's last-minute redemption, her desperate attempt to believe in him one last time. Sarah's knees gave out, and she collapsed onto the cold, unforgiving pavement. Her breath came in short gasps as the reality of what had just happened slammed into her. She had been played. The man she had fallen for, the man she had betrayed Daniel for, was gone, and she was left, broken and alone, staring at the wreckage of her life. The agents didn't say anything as they moved past her, their business done. Daniel watched her for a moment, his gaze unreadable, before turning to follow the others. And in that moment, as the distant sound of Ryan's van faded into the night, Sarah realized that nothing would ever be the same. She had lost everything: her marriage, her trust, her heart. The life she had known was gone, replaced with a cold, harsh reality. All the dreams she had built had crumbled into dust, and she was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered existence. As Sarah sat there, her body numb and her mind swirling, one thought refused to leave her. Had Daniel ever truly loved her? Her heart ached with the weight of the question. In the midst of everything that had happened, the lies, the betrayal, the secrets, there was one truth she couldn't deny. Daniel had loved her. Even through the cold detachment, the odd distance he'd kept, Sarah knew now that his feelings for her had been real. He hadn't been just a spy, a man playing a part in a dangerous game. He had been her husband, someone who had shared in her dreams, her fears, her life. She could see it now, every touch, every look, every word. There had been love there, buried under the weight of his duty. But as much as that love was real, so was his job. His role as an undercover agent had been his first priority, his true calling. Sarah had been a part of a much larger mission, one that had taken precedence over everything. His love for her had been genuine, but it had never been enough to pull him away from the life he had chosen, the life that had always been there, hidden in the shadows, calling to him in ways Sarah could never fully understand. And now, she was left with the aftermath of that truth. Sarah's heart shattered as the pieces fell into place. Daniel had always been torn between his duty and his love for her. And in the end, it was his job that had come first. The man she thought she knew, her husband, her partner, was a stranger in so many ways. He had always been living a life she hadn't been a part of. And now, there was no going back. As the last of the agents disappeared into the distance, Sarah was left with nothing but the cold, empty reality of her new life. Daniel's love had been real, but so had his job, and in the end, it was the job that had won. As Sarah sat there, the weight of her betrayal felt like a 1,000-pound anchor, dragging her down. She had loved Daniel, truly loved him, but in her search for excitement, she had betrayed the one person who had always been there for her. And now, standing on the edge of everything she had known, she realized the consequences of her actions. The sound of footsteps echoed through the night, each step heavy with finality. She turned slowly, her heart beating faster with every passing moment. And there he was, Daniel. He wasn't looking at her, his face a mask of cold determination. He walked past her, his movements steady, deliberate, like he was already miles away from her, even though they stood just feet apart. For a fleeting moment, Sarah thought she might still be able to reach him. Maybe, she thought, maybe there's still time for an apology, for some kind of understanding. But then he stopped. Just for a moment, he paused, his back still to her, his shoulders tense with the weight of everything they had been through. "I loved you, Sarah," he said, his voice low but firm. There was no anger in his words, no bitterness, only the cold truth. "But I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending that everything is fine, when the truth is you've chosen a different path, and I have my own." The words cut through Sarah like a knife. He wasn't angry, he wasn't yelling, but the finality in his voice was deafening. This wasn't a moment of forgiveness. This wasn't a moment of reconciliation. This was the end. And then, without another word, Daniel turned and walked away. Each step he took seemed to echo in Sarah's heart, each one a reminder that he was leaving, and this time, for good. Sarah wanted to run after him, to beg him to stop, to tell him that she was sorry, that she hadn't meant to hurt him. But the truth was, it was too late. The damage had been done. She watched as his figure grew smaller in the distance, her heart breaking with each passing second. And in that moment, she understood. The man she had betrayed was walking away, leaving her with nothing but the remnants of the life they had shared. The world around her felt empty, as if the very ground beneath her had fallen away. She had lost him, and there was no turning back.